Science!
Welcome to Science this week. So, one of the biggest stories in space and space exploration and science in general lately has been the talk of returning to the moon, also to Mars one day as well. And there's been lots and lots of talk about this, not only from NASA, but from, private companies like SpaceX, Blue Origin, and others, all with their plans of getting humans back to the moon and eventually to Mars. And one of the things that has been thrown around lately is the word Artemis and that mission that NASA has laid out. And I kind of wanted to unpack that a little bit. We've talked about it a little bit in various episodes here on the science segment. But there's some really interesting stuff, and we are all part of this next generation of space exploration, the Artemis Generation. So what exactly is Artemis? NASA is committed to bringing American astronauts, launching them from America into space again, because we haven't done that since the space shuttle, and bringing them back to the moon by 2024. Through the agency's Artemis Lunar Exploration Program, we will use innovative new technologies and systems to explore more of the moon than we ever have before. You have to remember, all of the Apollo missions basically went to the same spot. So we explored, a radius of that spot, but not the entirety of the moon. And as we celebrate 50 years since those Apollo missions, it's pretty fitting that we're talking about going back again, even though it's taken 50 years, unfortunately. We will collaborate with our commercial and international partners to establish sustainable missions by 2028. That is directly from NASA, saying that they're working very closely with all of these private partners, commercial partners, everybody involved to make a giant human effort to get back to the moon. This is all about humanity. It's not about a single government organization or a private company. It's about getting humanity back to the moon and then a interplanetary society, which is something that we desperately need to be. So where did the name Artemis come from? Artemis was the twin sister of Apollo and the goddess of the moon in Greek mythology. Now she personifies our path to the moon as the name of NASA's program to return astronauts there by 2024, including the first woman. And as the torch bringer, literally and figuratively, Artemis will light our way to Mars. With this in mind, NASA has unveiled the new Artemis program identity, a bold look that embodies the determination of the men and women who will carry our missions forward. They will explore regions of the moon never visited, unlock mysteries of the universe, and test the technology that will extend the bounds of humanity farther into the solar system. Very, very exciting. So they developed this brand new logo, and with Earth blue, rocket red, and lunar silver for colors, every part of the identity has meaning. The A symbolizes an arrowhead from Artemis's quiver and represents the launch. The tip of the A is points beyond the moon and signifies that our efforts at the moon are not the conclusion, but rather the preparation for all that lies beyond, to get humanity to Mars and even beyond. The Earth crescent that you see, the crescent of the Earth at the bottom, shows missions from humanity's perspective. From Earth, we go. We launch from here. Back to Earth, all that we learn and develop will return, and this crescent also visualizes Artemis's bow as the source from which all energy and effort is sent. And then the trajectory moves from left to right through the crossbar of the A, opposite that of Apollo. Thus, it highlights the differences in our return to the moon this time. The trajectory is red to symbolize that we have our sights on Mars as well. And then, obviously, the moon is our next destination and a stepping stone for Mars. It's the focus of all Artemis's efforts. This attention to detail is always in the logos and visuals that NASA creates. They've always been very smart and very succinct about the logos that they create. I wanted to just bring up this famous design, the one that everybody knows, the insignia, or famously referred to as the meatball. I don't know if you knew that that was called the meatball. In that design, the sphere represents a planet. The stars obviously represent space. The red chevron is a wing representing aeronautics, which was the latest design in hypersonic wings at the time the logo was developed in 1959. And then there is an orbiting spacecraft going around the wing. It's known officially as the insignia, and it wasn't actually started to be called the meatball until around 1975, and that nickname just stuck, and everybody at NASA calls it the meatball now. And at that time in 1975, NASA actually modernized the logo and switched to the worm, which is this red stylized rendering of the letters NASA, which I'm sure you're all familiar with as well. So back to Artemis. Why go to the moon? With the Artemis program, we will demonstrate new technologies, capabilities, and business approaches needed for future exploration, including Mars. We're going to establish American leadership and a strategic presence on the moon while expanding our U.S. global economic impact. Those of us who are enamored with the space race of the Apollo missions or might have even been alive during that time, it was a great time in this country. It was a ton of pride, American pride, being a part of that space race. And this is a way to bring that back. But again, that is only a piece of it as we are looking towards furthering all of humanity as well. It's also going to inspire a new generation and encourage careers in STEM and STEAM. And for more on what STEM and STEAM and those types of careers are, you should definitely check out a recent episode of Fueled by Deathcast titled Coffee, Science, and Space. And it's all about the second time Death Wish Coffee got to go to space, this time as part of a student-led science experiment, thanks in part to incredible schools that embrace STEM and STEAM programs. All of this culminates into what Artemis and that entire program and that mission is going to achieve. And that's really, really exciting. And I can't think of a better way to explain this than to have Captain Kirk himself, William Shatner, explain it in this awesome video from NASA.
50 years ago, we pioneered a path to the moon. The trail we blazed cut through the fictions of science and showed us all what was possible.
It's very pretty out here.
Today, our calling to explore is even greater. To go farther, we must be able to sustain missions of greater distance and duration. We must use the resources we find at our destinations. We must overcome radiation, isolation, gravity, and extreme environments like never before. These are the challenges we face to push the bounds of humanity. We're going to the moon to stay by 2024, and this is how.
This all starts with the ability to get larger, heavier payloads off-planet and beyond Earth's gravity.
For this, we designed an entirely new rocket.
The Space Launch System. SLS will be the most powerful rocket ever developed.
And with components in production
and more in testing,
this system is capable of being the catalyst for deep space missions.
We need a capsule
that can support humans from launch
through deep space and return safely back to Earth.
For this, we've built Orion.
This is NASA's Next Generation human space capsule.
Using data from lunar orbiters that continue to reveal the moon's hazards and resources,
we're currently developing an entirely new approach to landing and operating on the moon.
Using our commercial partners to deliver science instruments and robotics to the surface, we are paving the way for human missions in 2024.
Our charge is to go quickly and to stay, to press our collective efforts forward with a fervor that will see us return to the moon in a manner that is wholly different than 50 years ago.
We want lunar landers that are reusable,
that can land anywhere on the lunar surface. The simplest way to do so is to give them a platform in orbit around the moon from which to transition.
an orbiting platform to host deep space experiments and be a waypoint for human capsules. We call this lunar outpost Gateway.
The beauty of the Gateway is that it can be moved between orbits.
It will balance between the Earth and Moon's gravity,
in a position that is ideal for launching even deeper space missions.
In 2009, we learned that the moon contains millions of tons of water ice.
This ice can be extracted and purified for water. It can be separated in oxygen for breathing or hydrogen for rocket fuel.
The moon is quite uniquely suited
to prepare us and propel us to Mars and beyond.
This is what we are building.
This is what we're training for.
This we can replicate throughout the solar system.
This is the next chapter of human space exploration.
Humans are the most fragile element of this entire endeavor, and yet we go for humanity. We go to the moon and onto Mars to seek knowledge and understanding and to share it with all. We go knowing our efforts will create opportunities that cannot be foreseen. We go because we are destined to explore and see it with our own eyes. We turn towards the moon now, not as a conclusion, but as preparation, as a checkpoint toward all that lies beyond. Our greatest adventures remain ahead of us. We are going.
We're going.
We are going.
We are going. We're going.
So you saw kind of a breakdown of what exactly Artemis is going to do and how we're going to get there. But really, how are we going to get there? And some of these pieces we talked about, again, on this very segment before. NASA's newest powerful rocket, the Space Launch System, the SLS, will send astronauts aboard the Orion spacecraft over 250,000 miles from Earth to lunar orbit. And then astronauts will dock Orion at the Gateway, where they will live and work around the moon. The crew will take expeditions from the Gateway to the surface of the moon in a new human landing system before returning to the orbital outpost. Think of like a taxi system almost. So let's break that down a little bit. The SLS, NASA's Space Launch System, or the SLS, is an advanced launch vehicle that provides the foundation for human exploration beyond Earth's orbit. It has unprecedented power and capabilities. It's the only rocket that can send Orion astronauts and a large cargo to the moon on a single mission. The SLS team is producing NASA's first deep space rocket built since the Saturn V, and the Saturn V was famous for literally bringing the Apollo missions into space. Engineers are making progress towards delivering the first SLS rocket to NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida for its first launch. There's been many, many tests, and like I've said many times on this segment, definitely bookmark nasa.gov for all the latest updates on all of these mission parameters. The other part of this is the Orion spacecraft. And the Orion spacecraft is built to take humans farther than they've ever gone before. Orion will serve as the exploration vehicle that will carry the crew to space, provide emergency abort capability, sustain the crew during the space travel, and provide safe re-entry from deep space return velocities. Orion will launch on NASA's new heavy lift rocket, that SLS rocket. And speaking of those tests, a fully functional launch abort system with a test version of Orion launched on July 2nd, just a few weeks ago this year, from Cape Canaveral in Florida. The booster would actually send the launch abort system and the Orion to an altitude of 31,000 feet, and they work together to pull the crew module away from the booster and prepare it for splashdown in the Atlantic Ocean. The flight test proved that the abort system can pull crew to safety in an unlikely event of an emergency during the ascent. So we're getting closer and closer to testing out all of these systems. And finally, it's the Gateway. And here's a configuration concept drawing of exactly what this Gateway is going to be. And it's going to basically be, think of it like a space station around the moon. And you can see at the bottom right there how it compares to the International Space Station. It's actually much smaller, and it's going to be much more, compartmentalized. And you can see at the top there how the Orion crew module that we talked about will actually attach to the gateway. And it's filled with all sorts of different things. It's going to have its own propulsion. It's going to have, its own science airlock, its habitation modules. It's going to have a couple different robotic arms on it and other different things. So they're going to be able to work on this gateway space station as well as use it as a jumping point to get to the moon back and forth, basically, which is going to be really, really exciting. So when will we actually get there? Ahead of human return, we are going to be sending a suite of science instruments and technology demonstrations to the lunar surface, thanks in part to a lot of commercial moon deliveries with commercial companies working with NASA. The agency will fly 2 missions around the moon to test its deep space exploration systems. NASA is working towards launching Artemis 1 next year in 2020, which is going to be an uncrewed flight test of the SLS and also the Orion spacecraft. Artemis 2 is slated for 2 years later in 2022, and it'll be the first SLS with an Orion flight crew. NASA will then land astronauts, thanks to the SLS and Orion, on the moon by 2024 with the Artemis 3, and then hopefully about once a year thereafter. So what are we going to do when we're there? While Mars remains the ultimate goal on our horizon, we have set our sights first on exploring the entire surface of the moon with human and robotic explorers. We will send astronauts to new locations, including the lunar South Pole, and at the moon, we will find and use water and other critical resources needed for long-term exploration. We're already finding more pockets of water and water ice than we ever thought possible on the moon. We're going to investigate the moon's mysteries and learn more about our home planet by literally researching the moon. And we're going to learn how to live and operate on the surface of another celestial body. Now, this is the best way to test out a lot of systems that were going to be needed on Mars. Going forward to the moon will be literally the shining moment of space exploration in our generation. And it's all of us. It's all of us right now being part of this history. Apollo, 50 years ago, brought humans to the moon for the first time. Now we're going to return in a very big way and have the science and technology to back us up to be able to really explore the universe. We are the Artemis Generation, and it's very, very exciting. And here's a final word from NASA about what exactly that Artemis Generation means.
50 years ago, we went to the moon. We called it Apollo.
What many people don't know is that Apollo had a twin.
She was a woman named Artemis,
goddess of the moon.
We are returning to the moon
as a new generation of explorers.
This time to stay.
And to prepare to achieve humanity's next giant leap of sending the first human missions to Mars.
We believe our course will redefine what is possible.
That we will discover life-saving,
earth-changing science.
And that the challenges ahead will inspire generations.
This is our manifest.
For all who wondered if we could return.
For all who dreamed of pressing beyond.
This is your calling.
We go for all of America.
We go.
We go as the Artemis Generation.
We go.